If she's deceived me in some way to get her green card. Welcome back. I'm Dina Haynes, and I'm reading you my book, Neesa. You know, I like to do a recap. And that means if you haven't listened to or watched the first, was it 5 chapters, then you're definitely going to want to go back and hit the link. There's going to be a link below, or there's going to be a link in the video. But definitely go back and start from the beginning, because things are just starting to heat up, and I'm about to drop some serious spoilers. So Ruben and Neesa had kind of a big clash, right? I mean, it was nice to see Neesa having a good time with the guy for once, but it quickly turned sour, and Ruben was kind of a jerk at the end, calling her out as a lesbian, and I mean, what was that all about? Since I wrote it, I know we're going to find out. But that's why I'm excited to get to this next chapter 6. This next chapter 6 is going to be from Ruben's perspective. Be sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the little bell icon, and also like the video because that helps my algorithm. Drop a message in the comments below. Let me know what you're thinking about the story so far, and if you think that these two are going to make it to the end. Does it seem possible right now or impossible? And let's continue on to chapter 6, Ruben's perspective. Strike 2. Standing outside Denise's office, he stared at an old piece of gum crushed into the concrete. Pretty much summed up what their last interaction had done to his ego. That was twice in 2 weeks he'd dicked a woman around, and not in a good way. It did him no favors to treat Denise with indignity, even if he did get the answer he was looking for. He needed to go somewhere, but he was stuck replaying the whole humiliating interaction, wondering if he could have avoided insulting her. It was no use, since there were no do-overs. He was, however, that much closer to finishing the case. He may have eliminated Denise as Annabelle's possible lover, but he still needed to clear Annabelle's name, just to be thorough. Breaking the rules had worked in his favor, but he couldn't go to Annabelle's husband on a hunch, nor could he tell the guy that he'd spoken to Denise. He needed to know the context behind their phone records, which showed them setting up meetings when the husband wasn't around. First and foremost, it was time to stop dodging Jeff Schaefer's demanding texts. He knew he couldn't deliver a satisfying outcome at the moment, but time was running out. If he kept giving Mr. Schaefer the runaround, his patience would wear thin at some point. He might hire someone else to get the job done. And maybe Schaefer should fire him. He might have hired Ruben to follow Denise, but the investigation hinged on proving Annabelle was the one cheating. Whether the cheating was with Denise or not, it was time for Ruben to switch tactics and focus back on Annabelle. As far as he could tell, she didn't have any friends aside from the 2 who were with her that night at Q's. She spent the bulk of her free time either alone or with Denise. The story Schaefer had tried to convince him to believe was incredulous at best. Denise's reaction left no doubt in his mind that his client was either delusional or desperate to fulfill a lesbian sex fantasy with his wife. He couldn't blame the guy for hoping. He took another sip of his repulsive coffee drink and spit it out. In his mind, there was only one reason to drink the acrid beans, which had nothing to do with taste and everything to do with the buzz. Spotting the trash can in front of the Starbucks across the street, he headed that way, determined to get what he had wanted all along. He was crossing Beverly Drive and dodging behind a slow-moving Mercedes when his phone buzzed in his pocket. Once he stepped onto the sidewalk, he read the text but waited to respond. Schaefer was threatening to pool his business, just as he'd guessed. Ruben hoped the guy was bluffing. He needed the money, but more importantly, he couldn't stomach the idea of leaving Denise's private life open to someone else's prying eyes. He tossed the drink in the trash and stepped up to the line inside Starbucks to order a venti caramel frappuccino with extra caramel sauce while he typed a text into his phone. My schedule opened up. Can you meet for early lunch? 11:30? The restaurant was still quiet at this hour. One of the first customers, Reuben picked a table on the empty side patio for some privacy. By the time Mr. Schaefer strode in, Reuben had eaten half of his grass-fed steak. With his average height and slight build, Schaefer was almost mousy, though at the moment he wore a lethal expression, arms glued to his sides and lips pressed into an obstinate line. He had curly brown hair, cropped short, and forgettable facial features, so working behind a computer screen suited him. Reuben knew the guy was some big-time gaming program, which in his mind meant he got paid to act like a reclusive 15-year-old. Mr. Schaefer said, "Why haven't you been answering my texts? I'm paying you." From his mouth, it sounded too much like, "I own you." "I'm thinking of hiring someone else to do the job." Reuben swallowed the bite he'd been chewing and wiped his mouth on a napkin. "That's your choice, Mr. Schaefer, or you could sit down and we can talk about my findings. Up to you." The angry pink splotches blooming on Schaefer's cheeks reminded him of a 5-year-old in the midst of a tantrum. Though it was late August, one of the hottest months of the year, he could have walked here, which might explain the growing sweat marks under his arms. Reuben had picked this restaurant for its proximity to Schaefer's office a half-mile away. Pointing a finger toward the floor, Schaefer said, "I want to know why you've been holding out on me." His eyes bulged as he scoped around, as though looking for witnesses. He blinked rapidly, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down. Turned out his client was more emotionally invested in this case than Reuben had initially realized. Either he loved his wife a lot, or that was what Reuben had to figure out. "Calm down, Mr. Schaefer. Look, why don't you order some food and have a seat? We'll decide what to do from there." Coddling wasn't his specialty. He'd had clients who were desperate before, but this guy was hard to pin down emotionally. Seemed he had to educate him again on the unpredictability of results. He stood there for a couple beats before turning to go back inside. The details of his case had been at first unreasonable and then hard to prove. He suspected Schaefer was hiding something. Streaks of mashed potato and steak juice lined Reuben's plate by the time Schaefer appeared in the checkout line. Reuben called out for his client to order him a piece of citrus olive oil cake. From the look Schaefer gave him, it was the straw before the straw that broke the camel's back. Reuben almost laughed. He knew better than to poke an angry bear, or mouse as it were, but it was also a little payback for the guy's tone. Schaefer sat down across from him and tossed the plate with the cake onto the table. Those pink splotches on his cheeks had turned red. Reuben grabbed his fork and dug in. It wasn't often he antagonized a client, but Schaefer seemed to draw it out of him. Plus, Reuben's sweet tooth was legendary. Reuben said, "I'm sorry I haven't been as forthcoming with the information surrounding your case, but the truth is, I haven't had anything to report." Schaefer tried to interject, but Reuben stopped him. "I know how it sounds, and I assure you I have been working diligently. That's why I tell all my clients from the beginning that investigating is not a guarantee of positive results, only time spent on the case. And in this one, I haven't found confirmation for your claims that Annabelle is cheating on you with Denise. As far as I can tell, they're friends, and that's all." He paused so he could take another bite of the cake and gauge his client's reaction. He got nothing from the guy. Schaefer stared at his plate, pushing around the seared ahi tuna and creamed potatoes. "You must have taken pictures," he said without lifting his head. When Reuben didn't respond, he looked him square in the eyes. "Pictures of them together?" Reuben asked, "Why are you so sure Annabelle's cheating on you? And with a woman? I mean, that's every straight guy's fantasy, but chances of that happening are slim. And if she is doing it with a girl, is that anything to get mad about? I mean, it doesn't even count in my book," he said with a chuckle. "Am I right or am I right?" Schaefer's lips moved in succinct little circles as he chewed. He was as buttoned up as a cop, holding his cards close to his chest, doing an interrogation. Reuben couldn't imagine what kinds of sexual fantasies this guy had. Mr. Schaefer said, "I already told you. I heard a conversation between them. It sounded like a lover's quarrel, so I checked her cell phone and found the texts. It wasn't hard to put the two instances together." Reuben said, "Right." He nodded slowly. "And what was in the text again?" Schaefer frowned. "Well, it was more than one text, actually." His eyes darted around before he leaned in and spoke again. "They were sexually explicit pictures of my wife's body, her private parts." Reuben said, "And you're sure it was her in the pictures? She could have pulled an image off the internet." Schaefer said, "She's my wife, for Christ's sakes. I know what she looks like down there." Reuben asked, "What did she say in the text?" "Sorry, texts." Schaefer put his utensils down and sat back. His expression was priceless, a mixture of the kind of disbelief and frustration seen in those Real Housewives reality shows. Almost too dramatic. "What? Are you saying I would pay you to investigate something I wasn't sure was a problem? That's ridiculous. I need to protect my assets. I spent a lot of money bringing Annabelle here from the Netherlands when she agreed to marry me. After several months of dating her online, of course. If she's deceived me in some way to get her green card, I want to know about it now, while I can still file for an annulment." Reuben said, "You're so convinced it's Denise." He went back to eating and paused mid-chew to say, "That's who the texts were sent to, and there were pictures of Denise. She was practically naked, too." Schaefer's Adam's apple bobbed up and down, his gaze drawn to his plate again. "You do have pictures of them together, don't you?" "I want to see them." Reuben swallowed the last bite of cake and wished for another piece. He shook his head. "You only get the pictures that prove your case. So far, I don't have any." Schaefer said, "I'll be the judge of that. It's what I'm paying for." Reuben's gaze was on Schaefer's chin, in particular how those delicate bones would crack under the force of his fist. He paused for a breath before saying, "That's not how it works." Jackass was what he wanted to call him. "Look, the facts are the facts. You hire someone else, they're going to come up with the same information I do, but they're going to have to start from scratch, which means you'll pay double. A little more patience, and I will produce results." Schaefer said, "The money will run out if you don't." Schaefer sneered as he spoke. This guy had a real mean streak. What else went on in that marriage of his? Reuben said, "I can't promise you won't be disappointed, but you'll have what you need to go forward." Schaefer bobbled his head in displeasure. Reuben scooted his chair out from the table. "I'll be in touch," he said, standing and pulling a 5 from his wallet. He dropped the bill on the table for the cake. All right, that concludes chapter 6. Be sure to hit subscribe, hit the little bell icon as well, and don't forget to like the video so it helps my algorithm so that other people will be exposed to this story as well. And if you have any comments, please leave them below, and I'd love to hear from you what you're thinking about the story so far. And I will see you next time.